Hello and welcome to the Kenya Wanam Notam Movement Podcast. That's the KWM podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here with us today.
It's great to be here.
Whether you're listening from home, your office, or maybe you're stuck in traffic in a matatu or driving across the country, we are so glad to have you.
And the energy today,
Yeah.
it needs to be different. We're not just, reviewing news headlines.
No, not at all. Today, we are not just scratching the surface. We're going all the way to the bottom of a topic that I think really defines the current political reality of this nation. We're framing this as a crucial learning opportunity for you, a chance to reclaim not just knowledge, but actual power.
You're right. We're dissecting a phenomenon, a really historic shift that happened back in 2022, and the ripples from that, or I should say the tsunamis, that are still crashing against the shores of our political landscape today.
Exactly. And listener, before we even get into the specific source material, I want us to just think about the subject for a second. We're talking about the mountain, the Mount Kenya region. Now, usually when you hear pundits talk about the mountain, they talk about numbers. It's always about the tyranny of numbers, a voting bloc machine.
A monolith.
Yes, a monolith. But today, based on the source we have, I want us to look at the mountain as a character, a living, breathing political entity that made a decision in 2022 that, well, it broke every single rule in its own rule book.
That is the perfect way to frame it, because if you look at the history of Kenyan politics, since independence, the Mount Kenya region has been defined by consistency, by predictability even.
A very specific set of values, right?
Absolutely. It's all about the protection of property, protection of community, and a deep, almost instinctual loyalty to its own leadership, the kingpin concept.
But in 2022, that character acted completely out of character.
It went off script, totally.
And that brings us to the deep dive topic for today. We're analyzing a really hard-hitting and, frankly, quite emotional piece of analysis. It's titled The Mountain's Debt, Rigathi Gachagua and the Cost of Trust.
Ooh, that's a heavy title.
It's a heavy title, The Cost of Trust.
It implies that trust isn't free, doesn't it? It suggests that when you spend that trust, or maybe when you invest it in the wrong place, the debt that accumulates isn't just financial, it's existential.
Yes.
And this source material really, really digs into the relationship between the current Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, and the electorate that put him there.
So the core question we're asking today, I want you, the listener, to just keep this in the back of your mind as we talk, is this. What happens when a community breaks its own foundational rules of loyalty based on a very specific promise?
And then what's the cost?
What is the cost when that trust is betrayed? It's about a transaction, a promise made and the delivery failed.
And it's about the consequences. Because in politics, unlike in business, you can't just go and ask for a refund, can you?
No.
Once that vote is cast, the consequences play out over years, sometimes decades. And this analysis we're looking at suggests we are right in the middle of a very painful realization of those consequences.
Before we start unpacking the salesman, the betrayal, I have an immediate challenge for you listening right now. We mentioned this is the KWM podcast. This isn't just about passive listening. We want you to be part of the solution.
We're trying to build a community here, a community of critical thinkers, people who refuse to be swept along by narratives they don't understand.
Exactly. So right now, I want you to go to www.wantamnotam.com. Join the Kenya Wantam Notam movement.
wantamnotam.com.
We're talking about positive change, about reclaiming the very power that we're going to discuss today. It takes 10 seconds. Pause this if you have to. Go to www.wantamnotam.com and join the movement. Do it now, because the insights we're about to share are going to require you to have a place to channel your energy.
All right. So let's get into the first section of this source material. It opens up with a description of Rigathi Gachagua during the 2022 campaign. And it doesn't describe him as a statesman in the traditional sense. It calls him a political salesman.
That is such a loaded term, a salesman. When I hear that, I immediately think of someone trying to sell me a used car that might not even run.
Right.
I think of persuasion over actual substance.
And that is exactly the distinction the source is making. If you look at the political history of the mountain, previous leaders, think Kibaki, think even the early years of Uhuru, they often campaigned on what we might call technocratic competence.
Sure, they had plans?
They had plans. They campaigned on infrastructure, on the economy, on stability. They had white papers. They had these thick manifestos full of policy details.
But 2022 was completely different. The source says Gachagua acted with confidence and urgency. It wasn't about reading from a manifesto. It was about sounding an alarm.
Precisely. The source argues that identity did the work that policy papers usually do. Gachagua realized something very, very astute about the electorate in 2022. He realized they were anxious.
Deeply anxious.
Economically hurting, yes, but they also felt marginalized. So he didn't speak to them as a policy expert from on high. He spoke to them, as the text says, as one of their own.
One of their own. Let's just unpack that mechanism for a second, because that is a very powerful psychological tool. When someone says, I am one of you, they're implicitly saying,
I share your enemies.
exactly. I understand your pain because it's my pain. I fear what you fear.
Correct. It creates this instant bond of trust that just bypasses logic entirely. I mean, if a stranger on the street tells you to jump off a cliff, you won't do it.
Of course not.
But if your brother grabs you and screams, jump, there's a lion behind you, you jump without even looking.
You just jump.
Gachagua positioned himself as the brother pointing out the lion. And the source, it details the specific pitch he made. It was a binary choice.
It wasn't a choice between plan A and plan B, was it?
Not at all. It was a choice between safety and danger. Life and death, almost.
It was that stark.
Exactly. On one side, he painted the alternative, William Ruto, as safer, kinder, and more dependable.
Now, that in itself was a very difficult sell on the mountain, given the history of 2007.
A monumentally difficult sell. But he sold it. And on the other side, he framed the Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta axis, the whole handshake partnership, not just as political opponents, but as an existential threat.
It's just fascinating because he took the known entity, Uhuru Kenyatta, the region's own son, and somehow reframed him as the danger.
He did.
And he took the historical rival, the outsider, and reframed him as the savior. That takes an incredible amount of what the source calls plain speaking.
That phrase, plain speaking, is so key to all of this. He completely avoided the high-minded, sometimes aristocratic language that Uhuru Kenyatta would use.
Right, the language of the elite.
Gachagua spoke the language of the village. He talked about rice, about coffee, about the police harassing small traders. The source says his voice carried so much weight because it landed not as an opinion, but as an instruction.
An instruction. That suggests the listeners were just waiting to be told what to do. They were looking for direction in the fog.
I think they were. They were looking for a way out of their economic anxiety and their political confusion. And the salesman came and provided a very, very simple product. Vote this way, and your problems vanish. Vote the other way, and you are doomed.
It was effective because it was simple.
Incredibly effective.
But this leads to the massive rupture that the source identifies. The fact that the mountain defied its own president.
We really cannot overstate how significant this is historically. We need to look at this through the lens of, political anthropology or something.
Yeah.
The Mount Kenya region is famous for its discipline. It's famous for following the leader. When the kingpin points in a direction, the community goes. That has been the rule for decades.
You stick with the devil you know. You stick with the homeboy no matter what.
Exactly. Loyalty is the currency. Fear of outsiders is the shield. Those are the two pillars of mountain politics. And in 2022, Gachagua the salesman convinced the entire region to take a sledgehammer to both of those pillars.
They voted against their own son, Uhuru Kenyatta.
It's incredible.
They suspended the rules. Why? What was the psychological trigger that allowed them to override decades of conditioning? What made them do that?
The source uses a phrase that I think explains it perfectly. It says it was loyalty sharpened by fear and pride. It wasn't that they suddenly stopped being loyal people. It's that their loyalty was hijacked. Gachagua convinced them that true loyalty to their future, to their children, required betraying their present leader.
That is a paradox. To save the community, you must first defy the community leader.
Yes. And because of that, the vote wasn't cast in doubt. They didn't vote for Ruto because they were, unsure or just taking a chance.
No, they voted with conviction.
With absolute conviction. The source says it was an instruction based on Gachagua's assurances. He put his own personal collateral on the line. He said, effectively, trust me, I am one of you. I know the way. If you follow me, you will be safe.
And that, trust me, is the binding agreement. That moves us right into the second section of our discussion here. The source views the 2022 election not just as a standard political campaign where, you win some and you lose some. It views it as a contract.
A binding agreement between a leader and a people. In a normal democracy, you vote for a platform. If the platform fails, okay, you vote them out next time.
Right.
But in the politics of the mountain, because it's so deeply tied to identity and survival, The vote is a covenant.
A covenant.
Right.
That sounds almost religious?
It is. It's spiritual and it's distinct. The assurance Gachagua gave was very specific. We will protect your future. The we being the new alliance with William Ruto.
And he got specific.
He did. He guaranteed that their businesses would thrive, their farms would be secure, and they would no longer be, quote, subservient to the dynastic politics of the Kenyatas.
And the source observes, quite chillingly, that this promise still hangs in the air. It hasn't landed. It hasn't been fulfilled.
And that hanging promise is what creates the immense tension we're feeling right now. Imagine you hire a contractor to fix the roof of your house because he tells you a massive storm is coming.
Oh.
You pay him up front with your vote. The storm comes, and not only is the roof not fixed, but the contractor is just standing there shrugging his shoulders.
That brings us to buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
But in the source, it sounds much heavier than just regretting a purchase. It describes a feeling of entrapment.
A choice made in confidence began to feel like a trap. That's the line from the source. Just think about the psychological journey of the voter here. In August 2022, they felt triumphant.
They had slain the dragon.
Yes. They had defied the dynasties. They felt powerful. They felt like they had taken control of their destiny.
And now, what do they feel now?
Now the reality has set in. The economic conditions haven't improved. In many cases, they've actually worsened. The tax burden has increased dramatically. The protection they were promised feels completely non-existent.
The source talks about fractured alliances and the social cost. This isn't just about politicians arguing on TV in Nairobi. This is happening in the villages, at the dinner table.
It is tearing families apart. The source explicitly mentions bitter divisions within families and the breaking of decades-old political alliances. You have the elders who, perhaps, wanted to stick with the traditional route.
And younger generation or the traders who bought the salesman's pitch.
Exactly. And now, those who bought the pitch are being looked at by the others with this sense of, we told you so. There's shame involved.
But even for those who bought the pitch, the source says, and this is a heavy line, it placed power in hands many now regret empowering.
That's a terrible realization to come to look at your own hands and realize you built the very machine that is now crushing you.
It creates a powerful cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
It does. It's very hard for a human being to admit, I was conned or I was wrong. So for a while, people double down. They defend the bad choice they made. But the source argues we've passed that point. The regret is now open. The remorse is becoming public.
This idea of a trap is so interesting because if you feel trapped, you start looking for an escape. But before we get to the escape or the lack thereof, I want to take a quick break from the analysis to give you a tool. Because if you are feeling this entrapment, if you're feeling this frustration, you need resources.
You can't fight a battle without ammunition. And in this case, the ammunition is knowledge.
Exactly. I want to direct you to something that I think is urgent. There is a free ebook and audio title available right now called Kenya's Gen Z Must Reclaim Their Power.
And look, even if you aren't Gen Z, the principles in this book are vital for everyone. It's about understanding the mechanics of power and, more importantly, how to take it back.
I am telling you, read it. Take action. Don't just sit there feeling the buyer's remorse. Tell your friends to go to wantumnotem.com.
wantumnotem.com.
Create an account. It's free. Download the material.
The website is a hub for this whole movement.
Freedom never comes easy. That's a cliche because it's true. The question is, what will you do about it? Will you just regret or will you relearn? Also, you should check out https://beacons.aakk2020 buy books for even more free downloads.
Get the information. Arm yourself.
Okay, let's get back to the deep dive. We're now talking about the high cost of misplaced trust. The source makes a statement that I think just stops you in your tracks. It says, in Kenyan politics, trust is not abstract.
It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's not a concept. It is a tangible currency. And the source lists the costs explicitly. It says it costs lives, it costs homes, it costs safety.
Let's break that down for a second. How does trust cost a home?
Well, when you trust a leader to secure your land rights and they fail to do that, you lose the land. When you trust a leader to manage the economy so you can pay your mortgage and instead they crash the shilling or hike interest rates through the roof, the bank takes your home.
That is the cost of trust.
That's the cost.
And safety.
When you trust a leader to control the police, to prevent ethnic violence, to keep the peace, and instead they weaponize the state against your own people, that trust has cost you your physical safety.
The source says the man sold us safe, meaning the leadership that Gachagua endorsed, has quickly become a source of fear. This is the ultimate betrayal, isn't it?
It's the ultimate betrayal.
You invited the guard dog into your house to protect you, and now the guard dog is biting the children.
That is the perfect analogy, and the source details the evidence for this. It's not just a feeling, it's policy. It's the return of hostile state machinery.
We're seeing it. Public speech targeting the mountain. We're hearing rhetoric that sounds dangerously like the rhetoric of the past, vilifying a specific community as being greedy or entitled.
And we are seeing the return of arrests, intimidation, and threats to the political air. Leaders from the mountain who dare to speak up are being visited by the DCI. They're being harassed.
It's the old playbook.
It's the old Kanu playbook, just returning in a digital age.
And this places Gachagua squarely in a corner, doesn't it? Because he is the one who opened the door.
He is the guarantor. That's the problem. If I sell you a security system for your house and that security system ends up robbing you, you don't blame the system, you blame me.
You blame the salesman.
You blame the salesman. Gachagua's supporters are asking questions he cannot answer easily. Questions like, is this what we voted for? Is this the protection you promised us?
And the source analyzes why this is so volatile. It says, trust demands repayment.
It's an economic equation, really. You lent Gachagua your trust. He invested it in this new government. The investment has failed. Now the creditors, the voters, want their principal back.
But he can't give it back.
He can't. And when repayment is defaulted on, anger follows.
Yeah, inevitably.
It always does.
Now we have to go even deeper. If the betrayal of 2022 is the fresh wound, the source argues that there is an old infected wound underneath it that never healed. We have to talk about the ghost of Kiambaa.
This section of the source material it's difficult. It shifts from political analysis to something that borders on a memorial. It forces us to look at one of the darkest moments in Kenya's entire political life.
For those who might not know the details, or perhaps for those who have tried to forget, could you just walk us through what the source describes?
It refers to the events of the 2007-2008 post-election violence, specifically the burning of the Kenya Assemblies of God Church in Kiambaa near Eldoret. And the source describes it viscerally. The words are children, women, men locked inside a church, flames rising, screams swallowed by heat.
It's a nightmare. It is the kind of event that defines a generation, that leaves a scar on the national psyche.
It was the absolute apex of the violence against the Kikuyu community in the Rift Valley at that time. It wasn't just a clash, it was a massacre. And it wasn't just a massacre, it was a desecration of a sanctuary, a holy place.
Now, usually when a country goes through something that traumatic, you would expect something, a monument maybe, a day of national mourning.
You would expect never again to be carved in stone somewhere. But the source points out a very painful reality. The complete lack of closure. There is no monument at Kiambaa. There is no National Day of Remembrance. There has been no serious compensation for the families who lost everything.
Silence as policy. That is the phrase the source uses. Forgetting as strategy.
That is a chilling concept, isn't it? The idea that the state, as an institution, decided the best way to handle this collective trauma was to pretend it didn't happen.
Why? Why would they do that?
Because remembering is politically inconvenient. If you remember Kiambaa, you have to remember who is fighting who. You have to remember the commanders. You have to remember the inciting language that led up to it.
And that gets messy.
Exactly. And in the shifting alliances of Kenyan politics, yesterday's enemy is today's friend. So if the government is formed by an alliance of people who are on opposite sides of that fire, they simply cannot talk about the fire. So the grief was privatized.
Privatized grief. What does that mean?
It means you cry in your house, but you don't bring your tears to the public square. Your pain is your own problem.
And the source argues that this silence sends a very clear message to the survivors.
It does. The message is, justice depends on political usefulness. If your death helps a politician get elected, they will scream about it from the rooftops. If your death is awkward for a politician's new alliance, they will bury the memory.
This brings us to the mockery. The source describes the visceral reaction of the mountain watching the same man tied to that season of blood now hold power.
This is the knot in the stomach of the Mount Kenya voter. Gachagua, the salesman, told them to vote for the leadership that was historically and narratively associated with the Rift Valley violence.
He asked them to embrace the very people they once feared.
And they did it. They did it because he promised them they were safe now. He promised the hatchet was buried for good.
But it wasn't.
And now, with the threats returning, with the state machinery turning hostile again, the source says it feels like a mockery. It feels like they were tricked into handing the keys to the very people they were terrified of.
It's a double trauma. The original trauma of the violence, and now the new trauma of the betrayal.
And the source says Gachagua's supporters see the pattern repeating. They know how this story ends because they've read this book before.
This is heavy. It's heavy because it's real. We aren't just talking about abstract theory here. We're talking about human beings and real trauma and real fear.
And that is why we can't just glaze over this. We have to sit with it for a moment.
And we have to do something about it. Listener, I know this is intense, but that's why the deep dive exists. We go where others won't. But I don't want you to just feel heavy and then turn off the podcast. I want you to engage.
Action is the antidote to despair. It really is.
Right now, I want to interrupt this analysis to emphasize the importance of your voice. You might feel small against this state machinery, but you are not. I want you to go to wantamnotam.com.
Change Kenya. Start commenting, posting. That's what we need. We need a digital roar.
Create an account. It takes seconds. Start posting comments on the articles there. Share your own story. If you remember Kiambaa, write it down. If you feel the buyer's remorse, write it down. We're also on Facebook.
The Facebook page is https://www.facebook.com/Kenyampiatuka Pamoja. Join the discussion there.
You are not alone in this. There are thousands of others feeling the exact same thing. Connect with them. And remember, you can listen to this KWM podcast anywhere. Make sure you subscribe to https://rss.com/Jaime podcasts Kenya Wantam Notam Movement.kwm, whether you're in a matatu, a bus, or even at church.
Let's pivot back to the source. So we've established the betrayal and the trauma. Now we need to look at the specific debt Gachagua owes. The source is very, very specific here.
It says Gachagua owes the mountain more than just polite disagreement. He owes correction.
That is such a strong word. Correction implies that a mistake was made and it must be actively fixed. It's not enough for him to just say, oh, I disagree with the president on this new tax. The source says that because he was the one who sold the safety of this regime, he is personally responsible for the danger of this regime.
He cannot hide behind loyalty to the president.
Yeah.
He can't use that as an excuse.
That's the classic vice president or deputy president defense mechanism, isn't it? I serve at the pleasure of the president. My hands are tied. The source completely rejects that excuse. It says, no, you are not just a subordinate, you are a guarantor.
The mountain did not elect him to watch quietly. They trusted him to fight. That's a direct quote.
And that is the mandate. They elected him as a defender, as a shield. If the shield decides to be polite while the spear is striking the people it's meant to protect, then the shield is useless.
It's worse than useless. It's complicit.
Yes. And the source analyzes the political danger for a leader who introduced a risk to his community and now fails to confront it. It compares him to a guide who leads you into a lion's den and then whispers, shh, I don't want to upset the lions.
That's a terrifying but accurate analogy. If you lead us in, you have a moral obligation to fight to get us out.
And if you don't, you aren't just a bad guide, you are an accomplice to the lions.
The source warns of a siege mentality returning to the region.
We are seeing familiar forms of fear, disrupted meetings, leaders being threatened, people becoming afraid to speak aloud in cafes. It's that atmosphere where you check who is sitting at the next table before you discuss politics.
It poisons the society. It makes people paranoid.
Power without restraint poisons the state. That's the quote. And this is so crucial, listener. This isn't just a mountain problem. If the state can silence the Mount Kenya region, which is politically and economically massive, it can silence anyone.
That's a really important point.
If they can intimidate the owners of the capital, as they're sometimes called, they can absolutely crush the worker, the student, anyone.
It's a canary in the coal mine for the rest of Kenya.
Exactly. What happens there doesn't stay there.
Now, we are racing against the clock here. The source brings up the countdown to 2027.
And it makes a brilliant point. Time is not neutral. We tend to think that time just passes. But in politics, delay changes the nature of the crime.
How so?
The source argues that delay turns regret into complicity.
Explain that.
If Gachagua realizes the mistake now, in 2024 or 2025, and he acts decisively, it's a correction. He's fixing a mistake. But if he waits until 2027 when the damage is done and irreversible, it's not a correction anymore. It's complicity. He just watched it all happen.
So the road for him to act is closing.
The window is shrinking every single day. Every day that he remains silent in the face of this hostile state machinery, he loses credibility. He loses the ability to ever be the defender again.
The source gives a stark ultimatum. If he fails to confront the danger he introduced, history will remember him harshly.
History is brutal to collaborators, and right now he is dangerously close to being written into history, not as the kingpin he wanted to be, but as the man who sold the keys to the gate.
So is there a way out? The source has a final section titled Accountability as the Only Exit.
And it makes it clear there's no clever maneuver here, there's no backroom deal, there is no PR spin or new ad campaign that can fix this.
Truth spoken plainly, without fear of losing favor.
That is the only prescription. He has to return to the plain speaking that got him elected in the first place. But this time, he has to use it to tell the hard truth about the government he helped form.
You'd have to stand up and say,
You'd have to say, I promised you safety. This government is not delivering safety, and I am standing with you, my people, against this threat.
even if it costs him his job, his position.
Especially if it costs him his job. That is the only way to repay the debt of trust. He has to be willing to sacrifice his own comfort for their safety. If he clings to the position while the people suffer, that debt will bankrupt him politically forever.
The source ends with a final, very provocative thought. The debt remains unpaid. The clock continues to move. The reckoning will come.
The reckoning, it sounds so inevitable.
It feels inevitable. You cannot have this much pressure, economic pressure, historical trauma, political betrayal,
Yeah.
all building up in a closed system without some kind of explosion.
The cycle of trust, betrayal, silence, and accountability is spinning faster and faster, and it seems we are reaching the final stage, the demand for accountability.
Listener, this has been, wow, quite a journey today. We started with the high-energy sales pitch of 2022. We walked through the valley of the shadow of Kiambaa, and now we're staring at the ticking clock of 2027.
It is a tragedy, really. It has all the elements of a Greek tragedy playing out in the Kenyan highlands, a community that wanted safety so badly that they took a risk that has now deeply endangered them.
But the story isn't over. That's the important part. The reckoning hasn't happened yet. The correction is still technically possible.
And that is where the people come in. The leaders will only correct course if the pressure from below becomes absolutely unbearable.
I really hope this deep dive has given you a framework to understand what you're seeing in the news every day. When you see Gachagua speak, when you see the president speak, when you read the headlines, look deeper. Look for the debt. Look for the silence.
Understanding the history is the only way to navigate the future. Don't let them erase the memory of the promise.
I trust you have enjoyed this podcast and, much more importantly, that you have learned a lot. We don't do fluff here. We do the hard work.
And we need you to do the hard work, too.
This is the final call to action for this deep dive, and I need you to take it seriously. Join the Kenya Wandam Notum movement, the KWM-at www.wandamnotum.com. Be counted.
Don't be a spectator in your own country's fate.
And remember that resource we talked about? This is urgent. Download the free ebook and audio. Kenya's Gen Z must reclaim their power.
It is a blueprint for action. It really is.
It is free. Read it. Take action. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbors to go to wandamnotum.com. Create an account. Download the free ebook and audio. Again, it is completely free. There is no excuse.
Freedom never comes easy.
What will you do? That is the question we leave you with. For more free downloads, visit https://beacons.ak/20 buy books.
And please keep the conversation going.
Change Kenya by starting to comment and post. We need your voice now more than ever. Create your account at wandamnotam.com and start posting. Join us on Facebook at https://www.facebook.com/Kenyampidatukupamaja.
We are building a community, and you need to be a part of it.
And keep listening. You can enjoy the KWM podcast at home, in the office, on the road, in private cars, buses, matatus, churches, everywhere. Find us at https://rss.com, podcast Kenya-Random Notum Movement, KOWM.
Thank you so much for listening. Keep questioning and keep remembering.
This has been the KWM podcast. The debt is unpaid, the clock is ticking, but the power is yours to reclaim. Until next time, stay awake, stay informed, and take action.